Hello again. Welcome to another edition of Media Watch. I'm your co-host, Eric Tait,
Bob Anthony.
and our guest for this edition is Dr. Alan Singer. And we did promise we would follow up with Dr. Singer, or we hinted that we would, because we still need to talk about certain things pertaining to elections in the United States of America, namely the Electoral College.
I will try to explain the Electoral College
And
today.
Alan, just briefly tell folks who you are and why we were always asking you here.
Well, my name is Alan Singer. I'm a professor of teaching and of history at Hofstra University. And I'm a community activist in New York City. And so I try to blend all these things together.
Okay, blogger, community activist,
Blogger, right?
educator, historian, man of many hats. But
And
pertaining to
most importantly, always well researched. Always comes here with always comes here prepared.
knowledge.
Thank you.
So interestingly enough, pertaining to Electoral College, the guy who's trying to throw a monkey wrench into that is the current occupant of the White House. And Bob, we're recording the Wednesday before our Monday air. So today, this Wednesday, this occupant did something, said something. Bring us up to speed on what this guy just threw into the ether.
Well, I was just looking through Twitter just to see if anything would, if I needed to see anything before we started taping. And of course, I have to go to his Twitter feed. And today, he posted a 2-minute video, Trump did, and he opened it with the words, "This might be the most important speech I've ever made." And rather than describe this show, let me, while I'm speaking here, I'm going to try to share it right now and bring it up. And it doesn't give us any terribly fresh information, but let's see, I think I have the correct one. Here it is, and let me see if I can expand the video first. You hear it?
No, it's muted.
No audio.
Okay.
Restart it with audio.
Okay. Let me go back. And I can hear it.
Silently is probably the best speeches ever given.
Yeah, right.
Okay. But you're saying you don't. You're saying you can't hear it at your end.
Can't hear it.
Get rid of him and tell us what he said.
Okay. Yes, I'll do that. And I'm not sure what I'm not. Let's see. All right, I'll try to fix it. Anyway, I did take notes. He said that those first few words that you saw was
screen.
that.
See if you can lose that screen.
Okay. Thank you. Okay. It was just a 2-minute speech. He said the first few words were, "This may be the most important speech I ever made," and then he goes into, we have just finished this, quote, "ridiculously long November 3rd election, which somehow evolved into election days, weeks, and months." And he basically continued his contempt for the process, which actually worked, and said that there were so many instances of illegal votes being counted, and he would stand for America and protect our American dignity and rights, and he would be here to protect. Let's see, I think I have one more quote which I wrote down on the back of this sheet. He called it a coordinated assault and siege on the election. And it runs for 2 minutes. It's on Twitter if anybody wants to look it up, but it adds nothing to the conversation, just a 2-minute vent.
Twitter didn't flag that as more bogus.
So it did.
Reporting.
It said this is disputed.
Yes.
Okay, so Twitter flagged
it, but it didn't drop it.
Yeah, I wish they'd just kill it. There's no point in letting that dribble, all those lies. What do you call it? Unexpurgated lies sit there unexpurgated. They should have purged their system from that crazy nonsense. But that gets us to these continuing ongoing lawsuits, because we know that it's a backdoor attempt at his authoritarian coup to try to reverse the voter stuff. And he's only able to do that because of the Electoral College, Alan. So let's talk about this Electoral College. Why are we saddled with this? And give us some background and maybe some possible remedies.
Look, first, Eric, Hillary Clinton had more votes than Donald Trump in 2016, but Trump was awarded the presidency because of this thing we call the Electoral College. The same thing happened in 2000 when George Bush was awarded the presidency over Al Gore. Now, as people were watching Biden's vote total climb, he won by over 7 million votes. We were also watching the whole election is hinging on a few disputes in a couple of states, Georgia, Wisconsin, Nevada, Pennsylvania, and Arizona. And
these are manufactured disputes because there is no doubt about the outcome. But
but while we were watching those first couple of days, how come someone with a 7 million vote lead it's still in doubt? See, the United States has 51 presidential elections, not one. One in each state and Washington, D.C. Except for Maine and Nevada, whoever wins the state gets all their votes. States have electoral votes equal to their total number of congressional representatives and senators. Because Wyoming has no people and one congressional representative, it gets 3 votes. California has 55 votes. New York State has 29. The Electoral College was written into the Constitution back in 1787 because the founding fathers were scared of majority rule and because they wanted to protect slavery. If there was a straight up election, every state that wanted to improve its position would encourage people to vote, maybe even women. So there was no bonus for increasing the eligible voters. States were assigned points based on population with 2 extra points, no matter how many people were there and no matter how many people were allowed to vote.
That's colonial thinking when they were writing the Constitution.
Exactly, anti-democratic. It also benefited the states with fewer people. Now, the South wanted enslaved Africans to add to their point total, but they definitely were not going to allow them to vote. To protect the power of the slave states and to make it harder for the national government to interfere with slavery, every 5 enslaved Africans were counted as 3 people, giving Southern white planters extra representation in Congress and in the Electoral College. Because of this, slaveholders won 10 of the first 12 presidential elections because they were given points because they enslaved people.
They had more 5-to-3 ratio in the total population.
Right. The 3/5 compromise.
Mm-hmm.
I really believe today it's impossible to get rid of the Electoral College. It would require a constitutional amendment. It would have to be approved by 2/3 of the House of Representatives, 2/3 of the Senate, and 3/4 of the states. But the small states, the Republican states, the overwhelmingly white states are never going to approve it because it would lessen their hold on government. It's a racist system, it's an anti-democratic system, and because it is written into the Constitution, it is virtually impossible to change.
So here's my question regarding that. A number of these southern states that have been population controlled by the entrenched white state legislatures are basically creeping into the purple range as opposed to being red because there's this population increase that's happening. More brown people are going into these states. A lot of people who actually think like the majority of people in the country are moving to those states, either because of climate or jobs. Texas, for example, barely ever gets hit with a recession. My son actually lives in Texas these days. And so When all these job problems happen nationally, he says Texas never sees them. So a lot of people are moving to these states. And so there's always this outside hope that these states are going to flip and become, if not blue, then purple, with a chance of getting them to vote democratically. Didn't happen in Texas this year, just like they keep predicting, just like it didn't happen the last time they were predicting it. But if you get more population in these states that think more democratically, that the country should be run more democratically, could that not change the picture for the Electoral College?
It could, but the hill is very steep because you would have to get 3/4 of the states to agree. And because one of their concerns in the small states is, why invest money in winning Wyoming if it has so few votes? What will happen is the candidates will concentrate on the big states, New York, California, even Texas and Florida. But the small states will get very little attention. And you have a state like Montana, which also has almost no people. Montana is basically subsidized by the United States government. It gets all sorts of federal money going in. Well, the federal money goes in because Montana has 2 senators and 3 electoral votes. If everything was done by popular vote, you're not going to see all that extra federal money going into these small states. So I just don't see them ever supporting that kind of change.
Okay.
I think something maybe cataclysmic. I mean, I hate to talk about such an outcome, but if the president were actually able to steal this election and steal the electors, that might have the cataclysmic effect of making everyone understand how really broken a system this is. It might take something of that level, of that explosivity to get people to change their mind and get that 3/4 majority, which would be needed. But you're right, Alan. The hill is so high and it's loaded. It's greased too, so it wouldn't be an easy task if someone started it today.
So let me ask you something, Bob, based on this whole Electoral College battle, to bring it back to today, because that's what we're living with now. These lawsuits that Trump and the Republican Party continue to file, despite the fact that they're getting tossed out, they keep circling back around and keep filing additional lawsuits. And I believe, Alan, correct me if I'm wrong, the Pennsylvania case is going back through because they've now asked the Supreme Court to rule on what the state court already threw out. And so sometime this week, or whenever it gets to the Supreme Court, we might have a ruling by Monday when we hear whether or not they're going to throw that one out too at the Supreme Court. But this is the assault on delaying the certification of these electors so that they can actually vote on December 14th, correct?
Correct.
So
I'm sorry, go ahead.
I've actually heard that Rudy Giuliani's been pushing Trump to deliberately say, okay, just tell the Republicans to throw out all your electors and just appoint their own slate. Now, what's the possibility that that could be done? Are there enough Republican state legislatures like the folk in Pennsylvania who pass all these different laws to try to stop and file all these different lawsuits? Is there a possibility that that could happen? Or did Pennsylvania actually certify, and did their governor and their people say that's it? Because there's still a lawsuit. When is it final? That's my question.
And I think it's Monday the 14th. I believe it's December 8th. And that's the day after we broadcast that the states are supposed to finalize and send it. So far in Georgia, in Michigan, the Republican legislators and government officials have stood by the election. And because what they've said was, well, two things. One, you're accusing us of incompetence and criminality, and we're not pleading guilty. And the other thing is, there are down ballot candidates who got elected on the same ticket. I mean, we see in New York, on Long Island, 2 Republican congressional representatives were elected. In Staten Island, a Republican congressional representative was elected. If the election was fraudulent, how did these people get elected? So what you're doing is Trump has been attacking the Republican Party. So I don't think they're going to go along with this. I think most of them, they don't want to antagonize Trump because they are afraid that Trump will go after them, not now, but when they're up for re-election. Because in many of these districts, their opposition is not Democrats, but it's right-wing Republicans. So they don't want to make an enemy out of Trump, but they also don't want to jeopardize themselves. I think they're largely keeping quiet, but I don't expect them to join him in a legal coup against the United States Constitution. And I don't expect the Supreme Court to do that either. In 2000, in the Gore case, what the Supreme Court basically ruled is that it's up to the states. We're not overruling a state election commission because that's how our system works. Well, for the Supreme Court now to reverse itself and say, no, we're going to overrule the state would be outrageous. These people would go down in history as traitors and criminals. I don't think anybody wants that.
I'm not worried. I wouldn't be so sure about that. That brings me to Mitch McConnell. Mitch McConnell doesn't care how he goes down in history. Bob, you were saying something about his mamby-pamby statements regarding the transition and regarding not actually confirming or agreeing that Joe Biden is the president-elect. What was his latest statement, if you can remember it, about the process?
Well, I don't remember the statement exactly. And I know I read a couple items today because, Republican Congress people have been, bit by bit, have been asking for the process to go forward. And this election has been decided, let's just get on with it. But Mitch McConnell is basically saying the process will evolve itself. It will, it will come to its own end. And he's basically dismissing and not supporting any notion that this election was decided against the Republicans, despite the whatever you said at the beginning, the 1-30 record in the courts.
1-39, I believe.
But one thing I just want to
1-39. That means 40 cases, and the one victory was a partial thing that didn't have any bearing on the actual.
Exactly, it was a minor win, which had no real effect. But I must say one thing: usually when I read a court decision, it's perfunctory. You read a judge's decision, it says this was wrong, this is right, I'll support this, and so it goes. I've never seen so many judges get creative with their writing in skewering and eviscerating the lawsuits that have come up. We had the judge in Pennsylvania call it a Frankenstein's monster of little patches, things patched together, but no real evidence, no real proof. Mitch McConnell sees this, reads this, doesn't care, does not care.
Which actually brings me to another issue. It probably won't still be in the news when our show airs, but we're talking about the Republicans being assaulted by their own party, with Trump calling the thing. And you mentioned Georgia Allen, the Secretary of State, Raffensperger, I believe his name is, in Georgia.
I might be able to call up one of those clips while you're talking, but go ahead.
Yeah, the guy who works in his office held a press conference yesterday, which would be Tuesday of the week before we air. And the guy was irate and incensed. And he called out Mitch McConnell. He actually didn't call out Mitch McConnell. He called out Donald Trump for perpetuating the myth that he didn't lose the election, for calling their work fraudulent, for basically inciting people to violence because his boss's wife, Rafsenberger's wife, had death threats. Young kid who was working on the election staff for the Georgia elections office was just there to do his job as part of the people who did the software and the stuff, whatever. The young kid had death threats and had messages threatening him with nooses envisioned in as part of the message. And so this guy had a press conference and just reamed Donald Trump and basically his enablers in the Republican Party. Looks like you might be bringing him up. I don't know. It's a pretty lengthy one. I don't know if you can clip it to a point where folks could get a short bit of it. I don't know how much time we have.
Yeah, I didn't want to, I wasn't going to run the video so much because you know how it goes on these websites. It pops up anyway. But the gentleman's name is Gabriel Sterling, Georgia's voting system implementation manager. And he said, "Senators, you have not condemned this language or these actions. This has to stop. We need you to step up. And if you're going to take a position of leadership, show some." And yes, he's, I'll just maybe expand the video so that you can see who we're talking about, even though you can. And okay, at least we're getting the captions.
Yeah.
I'll run it back a little, but yeah,
That's the guy.
he's basically saying that, you know, they've
Has
been.
to stop. He's right. You have not condemned this. It has to stop. Basically, he's correct. People are getting death threat, and all because this man, who may already know he's lost, because I saw a Washington Post story that said, hey, he's not going to admit to losing because he's sending out campaign dollars, and he's raised, by the end of November, they'd raise $150 million from small donors. This was a Washington Post story that aired like where Wednesday, I think it aired December 2nd or December 1st. And basically he is fattening his coffers, and 75% of the money that's being raised, not going for any legal lawsuits to challenge the election, going to his PAC. And the PAC is going to be able to spend that money any way it wants. And according to the article, there's no restrictions or limitations on how the PAC can spend the money. He could go off on a vacation, buy whatever he wants with that money. So he's not going to not fundraise by claiming that he lost. He's just going to continue to call it a fake election. I don't know. This is really some horrendous stuff. But
it goes to exactly what Alan just said. These Republicans are afraid of him because he'll have the money, he'll have the outlets, he'll have the platforms to skewer them if they speak out against him now. So yeah, that money he's raising keeps those Republicans in check.
Well, there's something else that scares me, because we're Media Watch, so, and we have our audience, and CNN has its audience, and MSNBC has its audience, the Times, Fox. But what has happened now is the emergence of these shrill, right-wing, false news sites that have been supporting Trump. And there are 73 million people who voted for Trump who listen to these things. It's called Newsroom, Epic News, American News.
Right Side Broadcasting Network, One America
One
News
American
Network.
News, Newsmax, you name them.
They don't have any resemblance to a real fair news operation, but they look slick, and they report on Trump.
They're trying to out Fox. That's basically what they're trying to do, so they can steal the Fox audience.
Yeah, but tens of millions of Trump voters listen to this stuff. And it's very, very scary, because if he was just Trump, that would be one thing. But 73 million people voted for him, knowing the incompetence he displayed during the COVID virus, knowing the hostility he created in the United States. So I think the country is not in a good position. Even, I'm glad Trump lost. And I have hopes for Biden, but I can't say I have more than hopes. And I don't see how Biden is going to be able to bridge anything with people who deny reality.
And we have about 3 minutes.
You got a good point there, Alan, because as much as Biden wants to talk let's reach across the aisle. Mitch McConnell can very easily do to Biden and Harris what he did to Obama and Biden. And he did not want to cooperate. He had his meeting on the first day Obama got elected and said, we're going to make him a one-term president. We're going to say no to everything. So I can see him trying to do the same thing, which brings me to that Georgia runoff election. We know that those 2 Senate seats that are up for grabs in Georgia, if the Democrats don't get both of them and get a 50-50 lock in the Senate, Mitch McConnell can stymie anything Joe Biden wants or can come close to stymieing it. If the Democrats can get both those seats, then Biden-Harris stands a chance. So before we go, what's your recommendation, Alan?
Look, we have to call everybody you know in Georgia and say, please, the whole country is depending on you, and I'll contribute.
Every Democrat and every independent. I don't know if you can get those Republicans, like you said, 73 million people voted for Donald Trump. We can talk about that on another show. Bob, what's your advice?
I agree with Alan. The folks in Georgia have to turn out, and that includes my 2 nieces. They got to get out there and beat the garbage cans and get people out of their homes to vote. And as far as the Republicans, I have 3 words: Romney, Murkowski, Collins. They're the ones that screwed with the way the Republicans wanted to go in certain votes. Maybe they'll help the Democrats out a little.
Fingers crossed. Well, folks, this has been Media Watch.
We still have about a minute.
We do? Really?
Yes. Yes.
Oh, okay. Well, to sum it up as best we can, we don't have a very good system with the Electoral College having been set up to keep white oligarchic, predominantly Southern plantation owners in power. We might need to change that. We need to get Georgia 2 Senate seats flipped. And we need to get Biden and Harris in office as soon as possible so we can attack this COVID-19 pandemic. Otherwise, we're all going down the tubes.
Okay.
That it?
Yep.
This has been Media Watch, folks. I'm your co-host, Eric Tait.
I'm Bob Anthony. You can catch up to us on Twitter and YouTube at Media Watch EVT.
And I'm their friend and guest, Alan Singer. And again, thank you for having me.
Thanks again, Alan. Appreciate your expertise and your time. We'll catch you the next time, folks.